I just can't help but smile when I hear that tune because I know it's time for another week of the RecPoker podcast. This is the forums edition of the show. I'm your host, Jim Reid, Blusterini in the home game and at RecPoker Jim on Twitter. And I've got the best freaking job in the world. I get to just hang out here talking to my friends about this fantastic game of poker here on the strategy edition of the podcast every Monday night while we steal each other's chips and then free nightly play money home game. So the first thing I have to do is mention that we are brought to you by Running Aces, the official sponsor of the RecPoker podcast. They're less than an hour north of the Twin Cities in the beautiful state of Minnesota, and you can find out more about them at runaces.com. Most of what we do here is free, so we really depend on the support of our sponsors and also of our premium members who take part in our training material and study opportunities for only $15 a month. And one of the perks of being a premium member here at RecPoker is that you get to join the podcast. So once I introduce you to a few RecPoker Crew members, you're going to get to meet a few premium members here as well tonight, which I'm always so excited when they do. I'll just remind everyone, you can sign up for a free account at RecPoker. All it takes is an email address and a smile, although we do insist on both. But if you want to take your game to the next level, you can join our premium membership for only $15 a month. And you get your first month for only $5 when you use the code RecPoker at checkout. Now, they let me host the show on Mondays, but I am just one man. It takes a group, a gang, a crowd, a crew to make the magic happen here. We call this group of wizards the RECing Crew. Of course we do. And if you want to find out more about me and the rest of the RECing Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew. But you can also just listen up. You're going to meet a few of them right here tonight on the show, starting with the one and only Mark Zhang.
Hey, I'm Mark Zhang, and once a month we do hand strategy analysis. It's the first Thursday of the month, and you can find me on the RecPoker page under Mr. Bullet.
And I'm Rob Washam. You can find me as Rabman50 just about everywhere. And on the first and third Wednesdays of every month, you can join me for the book study. And our current book is Excelling at No Limit Poker.
And like I mentioned, we've got a couple of premium members to welcome tonight. The first one is Terry Langdon. Terry, a new friend I made in Ireland who's decided to come and join RecPoker and see what all the fun is about. Terry, would you like to introduce yourself to RecPoker Nation?
Yeah, hey guys, Terry here from Calgary. Actually, it's kind of ironic. I used to live in Ontario, like 16 years ago. I'm probably not too far from where Jim is now. Ironically, I'm in Calgary, and it took a trip all the way over to Ireland to meet Jim and find out all about RecPoker. I'm looking forward to helping it grow out here in Alberta.
Right on, man. Well, I'm glad we both took that trip. It was a pleasure meeting you and Tammy as well. Real
yeah, you guys folks as well.
Cheers. And another premium member joining us here, Lauchlan. We're going to talk a lot about you over the course of the next few episodes because we're actually tracking your progress, your journey, your ascent into the live poker scene down there in Australia. So please share a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to with RecPoker Nation.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Lauchlan Swann. I go by Dingo on the Discord or on Instagram, Swan Poker. Essentially, I've recently left my job to play poker full time. I've been playing now 2.5 years, coming up to 3, and I've had some success, like just learning and playing the game, just through watching the various podcasts and listening and doing some study and stuff like that. So it's more of a deeper ascent into the game now and trying to learn what's going on. So I recently just had a very good run at the Australian Poker Open where I came third for 120,000. So that's a very good start.
Yes,
the poker
career. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's obviously very exciting. It's very surreal in a lot of aspects. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
That's great, Lauchlan. Well, I remember when you joined a couple years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, I remember we were doing a big emphasis. We were having a lot of guests in Australia, talking to a lot of folks in Australia, and you joined up. And I was really interested in the way that you approach poker. You've got a very like intuition-based approach to outplaying the other players at the table. And then we both ended up in Las Vegas in June for the World Series last year, and so we got to actually hang out and meet there. And then when you told me you were taking this leap to sort of leave your job behind and take this game more seriously and really start playing more competitively and professionally, I thought, well, we got to get this guy on the show and sort of showcase this journey that you've been on. So we do have 3 hands that we're going to be talking about over the course of the next few weeks. But first, I want to talk to you just a little bit about what it takes to decide that being a recreational player is a good training ground, but you're at the point in your career when you can actually leave the stability of a day job and just focus on poker. Like, what was it about your poker game or your understanding of the game or the game selection that was available to you that made you feel like, because listen, for a lot of people, this is a terrible decision. Like, for a lot of people, this is very irresponsible. I don't encourage people to do it. We've got Mark is also a professional tournament player here on the panel tonight. So you guys have really taken a leap that is working out very well for you. But I do want to caution our audience, this isn't for everybody. What made it a good decision for you, Lauchlan?
Yeah, so essentially, when I first started playing, I had a lot of success straight away, just for playing the game, playing it incorrectly, but somehow, at those pub events, you don't get as punished as you probably do in bigger events and stuff like that. And I've come from a experience and background in trading card games, so I was quite competitive and ranked high in the world in the games I played. So I've always had that, and as I kind of played more, I wanted to improve. I didn't like playing just the pub games, like those $15, $20 games anymore. So I started playing, $300, $500 games, and I noticed obviously there was a big skill discrepancy and I had to improve. So the more I studied, the more I wanted to play more. And then it would have been just over a year and a half ago, I joined RecPoker through Troy Chapman, who I know locally where I live, who's part of the RECing Crew. And
Such a good guy, yeah.
Yeah, amazing guy. And I had a great run at a $1,500 super high roller event where I did an ICM chop for second place for 55,000 at the time, and that was just under 12 months. And then I had won a package through my local league to go to Vegas for a week. So obviously got the thing. And so the more success I had, and the more understanding I had of the game, it didn't change how I play, but it helped me understand like why I was doing certain things wrong or certain things right, and it kind of intrigued me. And then as I played more, that's all I really thought about, and my work life became less of a priority. And I got to a position at the start of this year where there's just obviously some good things that have happened to me, fortunate positions, and I had the opportunity where I could leave work and focus on poker for 8 months. And that's what I gave myself to the end of the year. So 8 months, just to see what would happen, and I can go back to work next year if I needed to. And then, so here we are. That's obviously just over a month and a bit in. We've got a good score straight away. I strictly really only play tournaments. I've delved into playing a little bit of cash now, like at the casino, just to try and make the bankroll consistent, I guess, or stay at a level, because obviously the variance of tournaments is so high. But it's just I don't think it was a good idea, but I just had the savings, and I'm turning 29 this year. It's just kind of, I think it's my best time to try and do it. There's Australian poker is kind of booming again. There's a lot of big tournaments coming up. So it's just, there's just a shot take and then see what would happen. And obviously it started good.
I love it. And I like that you're thinking about it in terms of, and I can go back to work next year if I need to. Like, I think it's important that we all have a context for decisions like this, where, it doesn't necessarily have to be make or break. Mark, we didn't talk about this before we started recording, but I'm kind of interested in your perspective on this as a successful tournament professional. I think a lot of our listeners, they're recreational players, but they think, oh, wouldn't it be cool to be a poker pro? And like, maybe that's something I can aspire to. If someone told you, like Lauchlan here, that they're kind of starting on this path as a professional, do you have any advice or pitfalls to avoid, or something you wish someone had told you when you decided to take your own game from recreational to professional? And again, sorry for putting you on the spot, but does anything kind of jump out at you?
I think one advice I would give a lot of people is to actually set take time in a week, a day or a couple hours to actually put that into like studying, actually studying, not just looking at charts, like that doesn't help, but actually getting into the nitty-gritty of every decision you're making. I think like like a lot of people, they transition to tournaments or to poker, whatever, because they're talented, but at some point talent isn't enough. It just someone will outwork you, and you just have to work harder than the rest to be at the top. Yeah.
Yep, good advice. And I know Mark does our monthly office hours on the first Thursday of every month. And I've noticed the diligence that you take with the tools that you use to study, Mark. And it's always very impressive when Mark joins our conversations. He has a precision in his language when it comes to certain spots and certain contexts, and what's important to study in those areas. And you can tell that you've really immersed yourself in the study of it itself, and how much that helps you apply that knowledge on a case-by-case basis as you have to make real decisions throughout the course of a poker hand or tournament. So that's great advice. All right, well, so we've got 3 hands here that Lauchlan has sent in, one from day 1 of the Australian Poker Open main event, one from day 2, and one from day 3. So we'll start with the hand from day 1 here. So I'll just run through the action and we'll talk a little bit about it as we go. So this is day 1F. The blinds are 1,000, 2,000 with a big blind ante of 2,000. And Lauchlan, I'm guessing at this point, we are not yet in the money, but we are sort of progressing through the day a bit. Is that right?
Yeah, this is probably just after the first break. So the second level after the first break from memory. So it's probably been about 3.5 hours at this point. It was one of the bigger flights, so there's still over 100 people at this point in time. I don't remember exactly how many. But yeah, so obviously quite early. The big thing to note about all the flights for this event played to 12.5% of the field, and then you're automatically in the money. So while ICM or anything like that isn't important at the moment, it's just something to note. Purely playing for chip EV at the moment.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And so we're sitting in the big blind with pocket 10s, the 10 of diamonds, and the 10 of hearts. The action folds to the villain in the cutoff, who opens to 2.2 big blinds, and it folds around to us. So the first question is, I mean, we're obviously not folding, and I'll open this up to the panel. And Lauchlan, you can let the before you sort of like reveal your thinking, we'll sort of see what the group has to say. Is this a hand that we want to be calling with or 3-betting? The effective stack is 85,000, so just a little over 40 big blinds. So I'll go first. 40 big blinds is like, it's getting into that uncomfortable stack depth where it's difficult to 3-bet effectively without either overdoing it or doing it a smaller 3-bet, but it's still a significant portion of your stack. I think the charts would say this is probably a 3-bet just because of the strength of the hand. But out of position, to just close the action here and see a flop, I think a lot of players are going to play it as a call. Does anyone have any preference for how they would play it at this point? I'll just see who's unmuted. Mark, you're unmuted if you want to weigh in.
Yeah, I would just 3-bet this hand at 100% frequency. Like, I'm not sure. Like, I just didn't see any other options.
And is there a stack depth that you would call instead of three betting, or is it just you're either three betting or you're shoving depending on the stack size?
Well, I think it's 25 big blinds. It's just three bet, it's a shove, but I would consider calling if there was some more ICM pressure.
Mhm.
Let's imagine that so 12.5% get paid. Let's say like we're 18% left and the middle position opens. That would make me want to call tens and even sometimes jacks. So I would base my decision off that, not but against the cutoff, like he's just opening too many hands. Like you can see if the cutoff has queen four suited, it's just opening, and it's just I feel like I lose too much value, or I lose too much of the pot share, just not three betting and letting him see a flop with queen four.
And Lauchlan, you mentioned in your write-up, so this hand's taken from the RecPoker forums. They're free to enter, and I'll put the link in the show notes if folks want to check it out. Lauchlan, while you were writing your hand here for us, you mentioned that normally you would three bet here basically all the time, but you've been trying to balance your big blind calling range, and is completing here fine. So yeah, so I think you're obviously already three betting is the sort of default for you. So how important, Lauchlan, is it to sort of balance that calling range? Is there something about the opponent here, or is it just that you're kind of like working on this part of your game of not just three betting all your premiums?
It's a bit of both here, especially for me because I'm extremely aggressive. I like to play big pots and so, and like I was saying, I'm trying to dial in and be more of that tight aggressive player. So my image currently is definitely, if people know me and people how I play, I will three bet out of the blinds a lot to out of position to play big pots with stronger hands. So I've been trying to balance that now by putting my stronger hands in just my calling range as well. So while I don't have much history with the villain in this hand history, because there was so many people I just didn't know from all parts of Australia or even some
Sure.
international that came over, I had already at this point three bet out of the blinds before with some bigger pocket pairs and things like that that went to showdown. So while I understand that, as Mark said, it probably is just a three bet 100% of the time, I also wanted to be able to balance that by putting my weaker hands as a three bet and stronger hands as a completion. And so I think it's a good part of the game to have. I don't know how important it really is, but I feel like personally my edge in a lot of games is navigating post flop and having reads on people. I'm very much more exploitive than GTO optimized in terms of how I play. So I just felt at the time that balancing here disguised the strength of my hand, and I knew my opponent at this level of game or this buy-in generally should be capable of betting wide and bluffing a lot when they need to. So not that I was saying like my tens was going to be the best hand here. I just felt like I needed the balance to kind of just see a flop and not play a big pot, especially because it's still early on. I was trying to settle in. It's my biggest buy-in I played.
Yeah, good point. This is the main event. Like there is an element of using that structure, right? This is going to have more generous structures and blind levels than a lot of the other like dailies or the side events there. So there is definitely that argument to playing it with a less volatile. And as you say, this has been sort of like your plan going into it here. So we complete from the big blind. The flop comes queen 5-8 rainbow, which is a pretty good hand for us, a pretty good board for us rather, with pocket tens. I think we're probably checking range here in almost every circumstance, which you do. The villain down bets to 1.6 big blinds, and at that point, it's our turn to decide, okay, we're obviously not folding. We've got pocket tens on queen 5-8, facing a very small bet. So we could call or we could check raise. Does anyone have a preference going into this? I think it feels like we might have one of those hands where if we check raise, we're actually allowing our opponents to play perfectly, where they're going to continue with the hands that beat us and just fold the hands that we beat. So it feels like a pretty natural call at this point, even though you do want to protect, the strength of your hand. Sometimes you just have to play some poker. So Lauchlan, you do call. I think that's uncontroversial here. We get to the turn. The turn is the queen of hearts. So now it's queen, 5, 8, queen, and there are 2 hearts on the board. And recreational players, less experienced players, you see that queen come up and you're like, oh, damn. Well, now like they might have a really strong hand, but this is actually a fantastic card for us, because if they had a queen, they were already beating us. And now it's even less likely that they do have a queen because there's 1 fewer queens in the deck. And again, we're going to be checking, I think, 100% of the time here. It's hard for us to rep having that queen, having played the flop the way that we did. And the villain checks behind, which to me really weakens their range. Anyone here in the group, Terry, Rob, Mark, what do you have any thoughts about, are players getting sneaky and checking back a queen there? Or can we fairly reliably decide that we're probably ahead at this point with our pocket tens? I don't see a lot of people. Yeah, Mark, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I think to the turn it was played good. Like, I don't see any other action we should have taken. Like, yeah, I have no comment. It's good.
And
I find
Terry,
that, sorry.
no, please.
I find that sometimes checking back a very strong hand on the turn will automatically make your opponent think you're weak and could bluff catch on the river. So I don't know. I like checking back strong hands on the turn. I mean, I'll balance it though by betting strong hands on the turn as well, and sometimes betting very heavily. So you got to mix it up.
And I do think, like, when I'm in that position, Terry, that you're describing, particularly if the other player is an aggressive player, that Lauchlan has kind of said was his image at the time. If you bet and they don't have anything, they're likely to fold. But if you check, maybe they'll put the bluff out there, and then you get to collect a little something out of that pot that you wouldn't have won otherwise. That makes sense to me. Rob, did you have something?
No, I was just gonna say the same thing. Basically, by betting here, you're only going to get called by better hands, and you're going to fold out worse hands. So, I mean, you want to bet for value, right? But what kind of value are you going to get? What is he going to call with? Basically, he's saying he doesn't have any part of this at all. He doesn't have a queen. He might have an ace. What has he got? Ace jack. What is he? He could have anything from the cutoff. He's going to be very wide. So at this point in time, any bet you make is not going to get you value. It's just going to get him to fold worse hands. So you might as well just check it back right now.
Yep. All right. So sounds like there's some consensus here. The river comes the 5 of diamonds. So now we've got queen, 5, 8, queen, 5. So it's a double paired board. It's now on us. So this is the next decision point. We have to decide, are we going to lead here, which I think we should probably be doing with a bunch of our bluffs, because our opponent has shown some weakness. If they don't have a pocket pair, it's going to be very difficult for them to continue on this board. I think ace high probably folds, overfolds depending on the sizing here. But we kind of have a better hand than that with pocket tens. So do we want to check and let them take a stab at it, or do we want to lead and see if we can get called, or maybe even induce a raise? Lauchlan, so you decide to go for a pretty small bet relative to the pot, but all the bets have been pretty small so far in this hand. So I don't think that that's giving away too much. And in your write-up here, you say, is block betting the river here fine, or would it have been better to check and bluff catch here with the tens, which is, I think, the question. And you specifically define it as a blocking bet, which to me means one that's small and that typically you're going to fold to a raise with. What was your plan when you made this bet here? Was it well? First of all, tell me about the blocking bet, and then we'll talk about what you might have done had they raised.
Yeah, so I decided to block bet here for two reasons. One was my opponent, obviously, I felt like was capable of mixing in good check raises as bluffs here and for value. And I wasn't sure after he checked the turn about the actual strength of my hand. While the queen is a good card for me, the check is very, in my mind, my opponent could be very deceptive here because if I was my opponent and I had like king queen suited or ace queen off here, and after how the flop played out, I actually probably would have checked as well. So when I'm thinking about these kinds of situations, I just try and imagine what I would have done, and versus what the theory is. And I don't know what the theory is a lot of the time, so it's mainly I'm versing myself, and then I throw in my opponent's image. And then the other important part of it, or why I blocked it, I had the 10 of hearts. So I blocked a lot of the heart combos that he should have on the turn that would have bet as well. So I'm block betting here to either call a small raise, but if somehow finds a massive blast here, I probably would have to fold and just give credit as a creative move on the queen high flop that he bets down bet. Because normally in theory, down betting and then checking is perceived strength at times as well, not just weakness.
Yeah, it's a polarizing check on that turn, isn't it? You don't see that a lot, but it really does hold both the very, very strong hands and the very, very weak hands. You kind of expect them to see bet some of those bluffs and then some of the medium strength hands as well. So that's interesting. You don't see a lot of polarizing checks. That's an interesting element to this one. Rob, did you have something you wanted to jump in?
I was going to say I probably don't block bet here. I think this is a perfect bluff catcher. A lot of aces and kings are going to feel pretty good right now, with the two pair on the board and not a lot of betting going on. There's no betting or raising going on. So I think a lot of aces and kings are going to feel pretty good and going to be able to put out a bet there that you can easily call with your pocket tens. So I probably would not have block bet that for that reason. I would more likely bet if I had a hand like ace five, or not ace five. Let's say something like ace 10.
Well yeah,
Five's doing pretty well. Like ace 10. If I had a hand like ace 10, I might bet here because there I'm blocking him having an ace. And if he wants to get frisky with a king, that'd be great. Or if he wants to fold his ace, that would be great because you're potentially folding out a chop. So I might bet an ace here, but probably check the tens. And now I'm expecting Mark to tell me why I'm really wrong.
Before Mark jumps in, my only question would be, Rob, are they going to value bet those ace high combos, or are they just going to check those back and get to showdown? Because their value target is going to be pretty light at that point. It's going to be like king high hands. But I think they try to bluff there with some of their like 8 high, 9 high hands that we can snap call for sure. Mark, you've unmuted, so if I see you unmuted, I'll just assume you've got something to add.
I usually have a microphone where I just tap it and then it mutes itself.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So what's your take then? I guess just as we get to the river, blocker bet or check call?
Well, my answer has to do with our flop decision. Okay. So if we check our 1.5 big blinds on the flop, we actually have a super wide range. Like I think you're supposed to continue like 80% or 70% against that sizing. So it's all sorts of hands. It's like king 4 of clubs. I mean, the obvious is 6, 7, 9, 10, 9, 7.
Sure.
But it's like even 4, 6, like some just random like jack 6 or jack 7. Like it's just so many hands. So and I just don't think Lauchlan, is that how you say the name? Okay. So I just don't think our hero in that case would bluff for that sizing. So it's just very value heavy, and it would never get called by ace or king highs. Like maybe from an ace high, but not like king high would fold. Maybe you get called by an 8 or 9s or pocket 6s and 7s. But because we have so many like trash hands, pocket 10s is actually really high. Like besides a queen or a 5, we just have tens, which is like one of the best hands. So next to full houses, right? And we have all these bluffs. So for that reason, I would just go for pots or 2x pot on the river.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do
But
like that.
it has mainly to do with the flop decision because we just have so many trashy hands.
Yeah, so and like I said, like we should be bluffing here a lot, I feel like. And so when that's true, it means we should be using a bigger sizing, and then we should definitely be using it for some of our stronger hands. And as Mark points out, like we didn't 3-bet pre-flop, so very unlikely that we have aces or kings or pocket queens or even pocket jacks. And if you don't have a queen or a 5, pocket 10s really are, or I guess pocket 8s, the next best hand. So we really are quite high up in our range.
So one more thing is like maybe in reality people would struggle to find calls, but the math behind betting big and getting called versus betting small and getting called, it's just like when you bet big and get called, it's worth more. Like even though you get called less. But I don't know, like I just go big and I get called a lot. I don't know, maybe it's me. Maybe people like just like to station me down, but I just basically for me it's like I'm betting the amount I want to get called by, and it feels like shopping actually if I actually have it.
Yeah.
Like just to bet whatever I want to get paid. Yeah.
I like that. And I do think there is, certain villains are in a position where they're inelastic to the sizing. Like it's just like, does he have it or doesn't he have it? Can I snap off a bluff here? He should be bluffing a lot. Like, why would he bet so big if he really had it? Like there's definitely people
that. You just use my aggressive image, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've shown you hands how I'm just like going bananas sometimes.
Oh yeah, you're a psycho, Mark. We all know you're a psycho. Yeah.
It's really hard to fold to me, right?
Right. You're gonna get called. You're gonna get called in some of those spots. So, and I think Lauchlan has a very similar kind of like aggressive persona and playing style. So that's interesting. I really like that. Personally, I'd be thinking like, how can I get called by a pair of 8s here? If someone had like 8-9 or 7-8 or something like this, they might play it like this. They'd make the small bet on the flop. Maybe they'd check back the turn. They probably should be betting the turn, but maybe they check back the turn. And I'd be thinking, okay, how much can I bet to get an 8 to call me? I'd probably choose a size in between the sizes that you guys are talking about. But I think Mark's point about the big bet, even if it gets called, 20% as often, if it's 1,000, if it's 10 times the size of the blocker bet, then you're still printing money, even if it gets called less frequently.
Also, one more thing, I believe that most people would call an 8 on the river, and people would make no difference between king 8 or ace 8 and 8-7 and 8-9. Where against a big bet, you should probably start folding 8-7 because you block bluffs, but people don't care about it. People have 3 pair and they just call. So here's where people deviate from GTO, and you don't have to actually play GTO. You just bet big because you have it, and they are gonna call every 8.
Pretty nice setup. Lauchlan, do you have any closing thoughts here before we wrap up the conversation?
It's kind of interesting, because if you spoke to me about this hand 6 months ago, if I brought it to you, I'm betting big probably 95% of the time, actually. It's only relatively that I've started to get a little more serious and everything that I'm finding these smaller, thin blocking bets for value as well. And one of the things I'll bring like to a question then is I'm willing, if I block bet for 2.5 big blinds, to call up to like 10 to 11. I think is reasonably the bluff catch off my small blocking bet. And that's kind of where I was at. But it's really interesting because like 6 months ago, I just sort of blasted just over pot 1.5 pot or something like that, and just hoped I had the better hand as to more the theory of it. It's just like
Yeah,
me praying I had the best hand. So it's very interesting.
yeah, yeah. The old bet big and pray
Yeah.
theory. Yeah, and I wonder. Well, here, Mark, do you have something to respond to that, and then I'll jump back in.
No, not really.
Okay. So yeah, so I think it's one of those spots where having a plan is the most, that's what I was gonna say. Having a plan is the most important thing, especially when you're putting out these small blocking bets here. You have to know, okay, I'm planning to call a raise up to this big, I'm planning to fold to these other raises. Lauchlan, do you think you're bluffing at this sizing? Because you talked about like blocking bets as thin value bets, but I'm curious if you're actually mixing in the small sizing bluffs as well, because they're less frightening to our opponents. You really have to pick your villain who's going to say, oh, well, this is a very value heavy bet size. Do you do a lot of small bet bluffing?
Yeah, so I've been saying recently also is doing the same thing with bluffs as well, but I wouldn't say I'm doing it as probably often as I need to be or finding the right spots. Um, in terms of like what combos I'd maybe do this with a bluff here, something like that flopped like a big draw,
Yeah,
but then bricked out obviously 6-7, like
6-7.
10-9,
Yeah,
yeah, 10-9 suited, yeah, stuff like that. So I feel like there's less good bluffs with draws and it's more pure bluffing. So when I only have pure bluffs, I don't generally, but if I have some kind of connectivity, elasticity to the board, that's where I'm finding these similar size block bets with bluffs as well.
So
But I don't
I
know
have
if
a
that's
question.
right or wrong. So
no, I like that.
I have a
Go, Mark.
question. So if you bet 2.5 big ones, do you think that what are you targeting to fold?
um
Yeah, as a
so
bluff, if you had a
when
bad hand.
it'd be the same thing, like ace high, king high. But I guess my perceived image lets ace high call, so it's a bit of catch 22, like of the theory of how I want to start playing versus what my image currently is, and that's why when you said you'd probably have just gone 2x pod here, I actually love that a lot more than what I did because I'd rather just get a lot of chips. I love playing big stack poker. I don't like these small middling stacks. Like I'd rather be massive chip or nothing. So
So,
it's
so
very
what I'm thinking
interesting.
is,
Sorry, go on.
yeah, so what I'm thinking is if you bet with your image, if you bet two big ones, you're probably going to get called a lot by ace high. And some person, a lot of recreations, they just put you on all these draws and they just even call you with king high. So maybe it's not very efficient, but like if you find the one, like for example, if you play against someone who overfolds, I think two big ones is great because you actually make him fold ace high and king highs. But against most recreationals, they just call you with ace high and then it becomes a bit worse. And then the other thing is if you take that small bet, like if I do you ever have a queen? Do you like how often do you do this with a queen? And the second thing is if I was sitting in the villain's position, I had deuces or threes or fours, I'm just ripping it.
Yeah. Because our range when we make the small bet doesn't contain the monsters, is what you're saying, Mark. So they can
I'm not
afford
sure, maybe
to.
it does, but at this point, like I like the thing that GTO does, what helps you to do is you play your own range a little bit too. Not only the other guy's range, and with deuces, threes, and fours, I'm counterfeited. I'm at the bottom of my range. I'm supposed to have bluffs, and those were the first bluffs I would pull from. Like I don't need to bluff 6-7 because I'm actually blocking the folds if I jam with deuces. So like,
Right.
and I'm not gonna bluff with ace highs because they win at showdown. So I have to just get bluffs from somewhere. And but most people would not ever bluff this spot as a jam. It's like who would jam that with deuces and fours? It's fucking crazy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. And I mean, this is a game of like playing in the player pool you're in, right? Like Rob talks about this all the time. Like,
Yeah.
what kind of assumptions can we make about the people at the table here? You know, as opposed to like playing against a GTO bot that's going to find those bluff combos that other people aren't. But yeah, I like that. I mean,
the
yeah.
reason why he would fold is because most people would like he would block with tens and fold to a raise is because most people don't do it, right?
Right.
What if
Exactly.
you have what if the only sizing you will ever face is a jam? Then at some point you have to start calling some hands, which would be like 10 top of your range which would be a queen or a 10 that
Yeah.
goes for the size, right? But then again, if you go for the sizing, like you deny yourself of a lot of pot share or like chips whenever you just get called and win a big pot, right? Like you have to weigh out both options, and it's more likely you're gonna get called when you bet big than getting bluff shoved on because you actually that's the thing. You actually rely on me having deuces to fours, and what if I don't have them? So at this point, you're just losing money at this, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is why these aggressive players are so terrifying to play against, because you don't even have to display that much weakness for them to decide, oh, I'm just going to shove it right in your face. You know? And like that makes a lot of players uncomfortable. We don't like to just like hold on and have to call down with fourth pair. You know, that's not the kind of comfort that we're used to at the poker table. But a lot of your profit in poker comes from making people feel uncomfortable, and the best way to do that is to make a big better raise and get them out of the comfort zone. So some great insights here. All right, well, any other thoughts before we wrap this puppy up and head on into hand 2 in next week's episode? All right, well then, Rob, Mark, Lauchlan, and Terry, thank you so much for weighing in. I thought we had a really interesting conversation here. Thanks, of course, to the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. And thanks for you, the listeners at home. We'll check in with you next week on the RecPoker Podcast. All right, everybody. Have a fantastic week.